And we're recording. Welcome to the Good Listening To Show, Stories of Distinction and Genius. I'm Chris. What's your story, Grimes? This is the Good Listening To Show, Stories of Distinction and Genius, the show in which I invite movers, makers, shakers, mavericks, influencers, and also personal heroes into a clearing or serious happy place of my guests' choosing. And I'm delighted to have the editor of the Oldie magazine, Harry Mount, in the clearing today. You'll be able to come in a second, Harry. And what we're doing is a really delicious hybrid of a founder story, because we're going to talk about the story behind the story of being the Oldie magazine, which I'll talk about more in a second. But also this is Harry wanting to experience Legacy Life Reflections, which is the special series strand that uses the same storytelling structure to record your life story for posterity. So Harry Mount, editor of the Oldie magazine, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So the Oldie is the magazine that dares to be interesting. It's not a magazine about retirement. It's a free-thinking, funny magazine, giving readers a light-hearted alternative to a press that's obsessed with youth and celebrity. Final bit of happy smoke. It's ageless, timeless, free of retirement advice, and crammed with rejuvenating wit, intelligence, and delight. And I got in touch with you about a month ago, Harry, because I'd noticed very enigmatically I was getting some delicious sort of push Facebook ads for the likes of Griff Rhys-Jones, Maureen Lipman, Joan Bakewell, Joanna Lumley. And I couldn't help noticing, and Giles Brandreth too, thought to mention him too, there is a delicious demographic involved in the Oldie magazine, which is fruity and juicy indeed for my own purposes too.
Terrific.
So, yes, how's morale? What's your story of the day? You've mentioned you've got some awards coming tomorrow for the Oldie magazine.
Yeah, well, morale is high, but we are working unusually hard at the Oldie because we've got our annual Oldie of the Year award that was set up by my predecessor, the great Richard Ingrams, to reward people over the age of 80 who are famous, doing things importantly over the age of 80, or they're doing fantastic things. You may not have heard of them. The crucial thing is they've still got snap in their celery.
I love that. And are they, do they get, I mean, what's the award? Is it a trophy involving celery or?
Get a trophy, and then there's a lunch at the National Liberal Club, and Giles Brandreth, who you've just mentioned, gives an encomium to each of them. And then previous winners come along, and it's terrific because there are all these figures like the ones you've just mentioned, who to people of roughly our age, who are younger than them, but we grew up with them. So these are people who often everyone knows about, but they're not featuring often so prominently in obsessed papers.
Wonderful. And encomium, what a gorgeous Latin word that is. So I congratulate you for that. Just tell us a bit more about encomium.
Encomium with an M.
Encomium.
Yeah. It means a sort of poem of praise to someone.
Of course it does. I'd like to say I knew that, but maybe I didn't. Also, you've written a Latin book called Amo, Amas, Amat, and All That.
That's right. Yeah, I did that about 20 or so years ago, and that was trying to revive memories in anyone who's lucky enough to learn Latin of those lessons, and also those who hadn't done it, to introduce them to the great joys of the language, and trying to be funny at the same time, if you can be funny in a Latin book.
And if you do get a spare moment, do say hello to Giles Brandreth, because I've been sort of flirting with him for quite some time. Michael Palin has said yes recently, and Giles is, well, he keeps saying yes, but then he gets further and further down the path. So it's only a matter of time. But
I'll give him a nudge, but he's the busiest man in showbiz.
He definitely, certainly, wonderfully, another national treasure alongside the ones we've already mentioned already. So, Harry, you are obviously a author and journalist, currently editor of the Oldie magazine.
Yeah.
And it's going to be my great joy, pleasure and delight to curate you through the unique and thoroughly enjoyable storytelling structure of the show that's going to involve a clearing, a tree, a lovely juicy storytelling exercise called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's going to be some alchemy, some gold, a couple of random squirrels, a cheeky bit of Shakespeare, a golden baton, and a cake.
Can't wait.
So it's all to play for. So with your permission, shall we get on the open road of the structure?
Definitely, yeah.
And the invocation and the invitation is to go where you like, how you like, as deep as you like into the following structure. So energetically, it all takes place in a clearing or serious happy place of you, my guests, choosing. So in your very illustrious career so far, where would you say Harry Mount goes to get clutter-free, inspirational, and able to think?
Well, it's a little place called St. Twinels, lovely name, a tiny village in Pembrokeshire. And ever since I was a baby, my parents took me on holiday, and my brother and sister to Pembrokeshire. And then when I was about 11 in 1982, they bought a little cottage there, and we all still go there. And in fact, I'm going there this weekend.
Ah,
It's very quite a remote part of the world, even within Pembrokeshire, and even within that remote world, it's on its own. I'd say 5 minutes walk from the nearest house, so it's just incredibly calm, very quiet, right next door to these terrific cliffs, which are flat on top, so lovely to walk along, bike along, limestone cliffs, but with fantastic features to look at, including the famous Green Bridge of Wales, which I'm sure many of your viewers will know about.
what I've just noticed what a gorgeous voice you have. Very mellifluous.
Kind of you, Chris. Yeah. And you,
Well, thank you. Sort of reciprocal happy smoke. That's lovely. Also, your grandfather was Thomas Pakenham, 5th Earl of Longford. I read.
great grandfather, yeah.
Your great grandfather. Lovely. And how big is the whole Mount squad when you all turn up to your wonderful clearing?
Well, it can be from just a couple of us to when we're all there, siblings, families, parents. It can go up to about to sort of 14 or 15.
That's quite the gathering right there.
Yeah, but it varies.
Also, when I first was researching you, I know that you're called Harry, but you're also called Henry. So you've got both going on.
That's right. That's like a certain Harry currently residing with his wife Meghan in California. He also was christened Henry, and in a strange way, Harry is the nickname. It's the same with Prince Hull in the Shakespeare plays. He becomes Henry V.
Of course, and a wonderful segue into Shakespeare that is coming further down the track when we start talking about legacy. So just to reincorporate deliberately the flag in the sand, the sort of what 3 words of where you've gone for your clearing, just say that beautiful name place again near the Green Bridge of Wales.
St. Twinels, Pembrokeshire.
Boom. I'm now going to arrive with a tree in your clearing, Harry Mount, and I'm going to shake your tree to see which storytelling apples fall out. How'd you like these apples? And this is where you've been kind enough to have thought about 4 things that have shaped you, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention, and borrow from the film Up. That's where 2 squirrels come in as well. Your monsters of distraction, which I'll unpack later on. And then the 1 is a quirky or unusual fact about you. Harry Mount, editor of the Oldie magazine, but it's not a memory test, so I'll curate you through it gradually.
Right. Yeah.
So let's go back to the top of the tree to shake the canopy as you see fit. So first of all, 4 things that shaped you, Harry Mount.
Well, I think a very primary thing that shaped me before I was born, that I have a lovely older brother and a lovely younger sister, but I had a brother born before me, a year before me, who then died aged only 3 months of cot death, so of no known cause, called Francis, which is my middle name. So I never met him. He died a few months before I was born, but I think the fact that he had been there obviously had a shaping effect on my parents, and in a very good way. We're surrounded by pictures of him. They always talked about him. So I think without ever having met him, the fact of having a brother dying before you must have shaped the way my parents brought me up. And the knowledge of his death, I'm not saying I thought this consciously, because you just see these photos around the house, but it introduces you to the concept of tragedy early on, but also in a way being able to absorb it, because as a child, you're not shocked. I didn't know as an infant who this baby was. So it's a tragedy, but it's very much part of my character.
Yes, so Francis Mount he would have been.
Yeah.
Very profound first shapage.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a bell for if we get stuck anywhere. As in shapage number 2 now, please. Thank you.
I would say, perhaps related to that, I don't know. I was an extremely neurotic child, a great worrier. And I think that affected me enormously in terms of being a SWAT at school. I don't think I was particularly naturally brilliant, but I think working really hard and worrying about exams made me not a very happy child, but it meant, non-showing off, that I was very good at exams and propelled myself through all these various schools and universities. But it wasn't until I was halfway through university that I really thought about what I enjoyed doing. So I'd say a sort of neurotic ability for exams was number two.
And you've reminded me of the confidence mantra my own son has, which is, I'm not a worrier, I'm a warrior.
Very good.
But because I live in Bristol, that's a bit, he doesn't speak like this, but the Bristol accent would be, I'm not a warrior, I'm a warrior. He doesn't speak like
That's
that.
very good. Yeah.
But anyway, good on you for being, well, the warrior set you in good stead for the accomplishment of then passing the exams, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also the later realization that there's more to life than exams, but also, like your son, it's good to decrease those worries, which I am still a bit of a worrier, but much, much less. I sleep very well now, whereas I didn't when I was a teenager. So it's the good and the bad side of worrying.
And may I ask how many children you have yourself, Harry?
I don't have any children,
okay.
and I'm not married, though.
So shapage number 3 now, please.
I would say related to that is finding what I liked doing in life. So I think related to those worries, I did very conventional jobs on leaving university.
Yeah.
I was a banker for 8 months. I qualified as a barrister and did the pupillage stage, but I never actually practiced. But I didn't realize, but in retrospect, I was doing the conventional things you should do, you think you should do if you've got a good degree. And it wasn't until the age of 27, when I didn't get the tenancy, the lifelong job as a barrister, that I finally thought about what I really wanted to do. And I had a catastrophic fall in reputation from being a libel barrister to a gossip columnist on the Daily Telegraph. And on my first day of being a gossip columnist on the Telegraph, I went on to the Evening Standard. I absolutely loved that day. I remember it strongly today, and I suddenly realized you could enjoy jobs, and if you enjoyed them, you were that much better at doing them. So a really big change in life, finding out what you like doing.
And I love the fact that you didn't go past the pupillage to being a sort of beautiful butterfly of a lawyer, and you ended up instead by being, I love that, a majestic glide from grace, I would say, to being a gossip columnist.
A jackal of the press. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you've cut your chops on being a proper hack then, it would
seem.
Yes.
Yeah, which was really good. I was still quite shy. And I remember the night before that job on the Telegraph, I was really dreading having to, stitch up my friends or be rude to famous people. But actually, on doing the job, you realize that the vast majority of the stories are provided by people themselves who want to publicize their book or their film or their poetry collection.
Yes.
And so on that first day, the very nice secretary on the desk put up her hand, waved an invitation saying, who wants to go to the launch of Kingsley Amis's letters, his collected letters, at the Garrick Club. And I loved Kingsley Amis, so I said, I'd love to go along. Went along, met Martin Amis, and I talked to Martin Amis about Kingsley Amis, his father, and also about Philip Larkin, who I also worshipped. And he gave me this wonderful quote. He's very friendly to me as a jackal of the press. He said that I asked what was the effect of Philip Larkin dying on Kingsley Amis's life. And he said, before he died, Kingsley Amis had 3 struts to his later life, which was drink, the Garrick Club, where we were chatting, and Philip Larkin. And it was like 3 struts of a 3-legged stool. And when one of them fell away, Philip Larkin dying, the chair collapsed. Well, that's a perfect little story for a gossip column. So I followed that evening. And I talked to Martin Amis, who I admired, about Kingsley Amis, who I revered. And I realized, God, jobs can be enjoyable.
Wonderful. What a first sort of quest or side quest, just responding to the who wants to go to the Garrick Club.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so that was finding out a job you like doing and doing it. And as many people have said, if you find a job that you like doing. That's one of the great keys to happiness.
In researching you as well, I know you had great pride in getting Barry Humphries, who you also really admired, doing something for you for the Oldie magazine as well.
That's right. Well, actually, that was going to be my fourth one, which was getting the job at the Oldie, because I spent a long time as a journalist, always enjoying my life as a gossip columnist and a leader writer and a New York correspondent. And I'd been the deputy editor of the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph, which is a fairly lowly job, but I had edited stuff. But actually editing a magazine was a whole new thing. And I'd grown up really admiring Richard Ingrams, the founder and founding editor of the Oldie. So that was quite daunting. But it has been the most extraordinary chance to meet and work with people like Barry Humphries, who had a column on the Oldie for the last 3 years of his life. So I regularly talked to him, and it was a extraordinary to chat to him, but he was still incredibly funny and so quick. I really do think the term genius is overused, but he was so quick. He would often, when we were on the phone, he would say something so quick and so funny in response to something I'd said. It wasn't a prepared anecdote. I'd take a couple of seconds to get it, and I'd want to say to him, "Oh, Barry, oh right, now I get it." He wasn't trying to wrong foot me. He really was working on a higher level, and to talk to someone as intelligent as that and as funny as that, who I've admired since childhood, what a joy.
I had Rob Brydon as a live guest in the live theatre show version of my show here in Bristol a few months ago, and I know that he was with Barry Humphries very close to his death, and Rob too similarly worshipped him.
Yeah. Oh no, he was. I think it must be difficult for people like that. Perhaps you've interviewed quite a few of them, but where their minds are working more quickly. Barry, very famously, which he wrote about, was a raging alcoholic for 20 years, and I think part of it might be that other people must feel, he never gave this impression, but must seem quite boring because you're moving at supersonic speed.
Yes.
Everyone, nice as they are, is a bit slow on the uptake.
And of course, he was generous enough to allow people to catch up. And a credit that he gave to Rob Brydon, which made Rob Brydon's whole career, was when you work with that audience, you don't just appear in front of them, you befriend them.
Yes.
And that's something that Barry Humphries took great pride in as well.
And then he would only humiliate those who he really disliked or he knew wouldn't mind. So he was extremely kind. Occasionally he'd ring up the office and he'd get on to the 18-year-old boy doing work experience, and he'd be really polite to him, and he'd ask questions of the 18-year-old, and he was genuinely interested in the answer. He was extremely interested in human behavior, which I think the best people are, particularly if you're then going to satirize it. You're observing everything.
Absolutely. What a wonderful, is that the fourth shapage in the structure?
The fourth shapage was getting the job as an editor of a magazine. It was although I'd been a journalist for quite a few years when I got that job, it was, I remember, it's quite daunting getting it, and it's you're suddenly responsible for 100-page magazine.
Yeah.
If you libel someone, that's your fault. If you make a terrible blunder, that's your fault. And it's still a thing now. I've done the job for 9 years, but fresh copy comes off the press into the office. It's always pleasing to see it, but it's beautifully edited by my colleagues too. But I'd say about 1 in 3 times there is a typo or a name left out, just as much my fault as anybody else's. And you think, God, we've been working on this for 4 weeks. Why didn't I notice it? But anyway, those things are very important, but they're not worrying the same way that a £10 million libel suit would be, which would sink.
I love the iconography of the Oldie magazine as well, because of things like the Oldie radio. There's an old radio transmitter that looks a bit like Alexander Palace transmitting.
That's right. And we think a lot about those things, that we don't want to be consciously retro. And one of the few changes I made on becoming editor is having fewer pieces about it being better in the old days. But at the same time, there are things that our readers will appreciate, like that radio mast at the beginning of RKO films.
Yes.
Give you what I call the R factor, which you go, so people recognize it and something goes off in their heart or their brain.
Yes.
Warmth and affection.
And warmth and affection linked to where would we have been before nostalgia, as that joke would have it as
Very
well.
good. Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful sort of shapeages to get us going. Now we're looking at 3 things that inspire you as we go down the tree trunk, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 3 things that inspire you, Harry.
Right. Well, old buildings. I forgot to say that in my checkered 20s, I did a master's in architectural history at the Courtauld Institute. It had been done a term of architectural history in my first degree, and I absolutely loved and still adore old buildings. In a good way, I got a place to do a doctorate, but I didn't get the funding, and so then I went off and became a barrister. But I'm rather glad, because I wouldn't have wanted to become a full-time architectural historian. I think it would have taken the pleasure away from it. In fact, even while I was doing this master's, going and looking at old buildings, I still liked doing it, but it became more of a job. Whereas now, doing it for pleasure or writing the occasional article about it, it's pure joy. And in fact, we're just about to come up to the 300th anniversary of the death of the great Sir John Vanbrugh, who built Blenheim Palace and Castle Howard and many other buildings, most of them with Nicholas Hawksmoor. And a friend of mine called Simon Scott Plummer wrote an article about Vanbrugh for the Oldie. I wasn't writing it, but I went along with him to lots of these buildings. And that was pure pleasure, because of loving Simon very much, but also going to see these buildings, many of which I hadn't seen before. And I don't know what you call it. Maybe it's the same R factor when something aesthetic strikes your heart and your brain, and the building's right and your mood's right, and the weather's got to be right. You've got to be in a good frame of mind. Anyway, something magical happens, and you get pure aesthetic pleasure.
And that appreciation of all things architectural, is that what was behind Lust for Windowsills, one of your books?
Exactly, yeah. So the idea of that book was that it would be a light-hearted guide to architectural history, particularly British architectural history, because I think a lot of people are really interested in buildings, and it is the great public art. You know, if you're not interested in pictures, you never have to go inside a gallery, but you can't avoid seeing buildings, and that's why it's so important they should be beautiful. So the idea of that book was to be in a light-hearted way, explain, there really aren't so many of them, but the terms for classical architecture, like the columns like Doric, Ionic, Corinthian and Composite, and the 3 periods of Gothic architecture: early English, decorated and perpendicular. Now, all those words sound pretty complicated, but actually there are only 4, or you could possibly say 5 classical orders of architecture, and there are only 3 periods of Gothic architecture. Once you explain those things, which you could explain to someone, you know, in half an hour or even less, suddenly all these buildings around you come to life. So the idea was to do that in a light-hearted way.
So encouraging listeners, watchers, to look out for Lust for Windowsills. And can I just congratulate you for using all those words about architecture of your own volition, because I wouldn't have known how to get you to say them by asking the right question.
But I love, they're lovely words, but we all do this with all sorts of subjects. I mean, I don't know anything about quantum physics. I wish someone could teach me the basics of that in a very light way. I imagine it's more complicated, but as I say, there's only a handful of difficult words there, and once you know them, it's great pleasure to know the meaning of lots of words, but particularly if you could see their public incarnation.
So maybe the next book could be The Lust for the Big Bang or something like that.
Well, but I'd have to take several degrees first. Yeah.
Wonderful. So second thing that inspires you, please.
Well, I would say the classics, Latin and Greek, which I read in that, I studied in that nerdy, neurotic way from a very young age. From around about 8 or 9, I did Latin or Greek, and I was doing it in a very dutiful way. And then I did it at school, then I did it at university, and I had this moment halfway through university where I suddenly thought, what I'm really interested in is history and novels. And so I went to my dad who's good on these things. And I said, that's what I really like doing, or reading. And he said, well, you could spend the rest of your life reading novels. Do the slightly more difficult one, history, which I did do, and I really loved that. And then a few years later, I started kind of going back to the classics and all the things I'd been told about by my teachers when at school. The reason why I should do classics, it was the foundation of Western European civilization and literature and architecture and art and astronomy and satire and all the rest of it. I suddenly realized they were telling the truth. And I'm really glad that I did these. It's really quite difficult. A whole lot of learning of declensions and conjugations, which if now, I'm now 54, I decide to take it up, I wouldn't have the will or the time to do it. But I think when you're a child, your brain is at its spongiest. And in my case, you're most obedient. So I did all this really difficult stuff. And it means that I can now really appreciate the link between the ancient past and the modern world. And it's there everywhere. It's there in architecture. It's there in language. 2/3 of English words have a Latinate or a Greek origin to them. And even in the use of language, consciously or subconsciously, I know when a word is classical or Anglo-Saxon, and most of the words we use are Anglo-Saxon, and you can use a classical, slightly pompous word in distinction to them. And I think subconsciously I use it every single day.
May I say, this is delicious stuff, Harry. Thank you so much. And
Right.
now a third, you're allowed a third inspiration now.
I think funny prose. The novelists I really like are the funny ones. So I mentioned Kingsley Amis, and I love Evelyn Waugh and P.G. Wodehouse and Nancy Mitford. And they all have this actually deceptively simple style, but they're brilliant prose stylists, and they're very, very funny. And I think, particularly in this country, perhaps because we're famous for our sense of humor, being funny is taken for granted, whereas actually to write funnily is incredibly hard. It's relatively easy to write a very, very difficult academic piece, but you basically got to get your facts right, come up with some, intellectually complex idea, and then you're there. But it's the same with stand-up comedians, Barry Humphries or Rob Brydon. Being funny, it's so completely binary. You either are or you aren't, and a lot of people try to be,
Yes.
and they never are.
Then there's the whole thing about, or the notion of physical comedy as well, because of my love of people like Stan Laurel and
Yeah,
the
brilliant.
classics.
Yeah.
And that's why I like Michael Palin so much, because of the physicality too.
Yeah, and that Stan Laurel's an extremely good example. I was watching Lauren Hardy the other day, that their kind of slapstick, it's a strange sort of magic, because it could be very unfunny if you explain them and try to act it yourself. It wouldn't be funny, but it is. Barry Cryer, the late great Barry Cryer, who I worked with at the Oldie, wonderful man, but he talked about people who had funny bones. And I said to him, well, Barry, you've got funny bones. He said, no, I'm not. I can remember. And he could remember thousands of jokes. But he said he wasn't like, he knew Tommy Cooper well. He said Tommy Cooper, there was something about it. He just had it. And it's, as Barry used to say, you couldn't analyze comedy. It's like dissecting a frog. Nobody laughs and the frog dies. One of his. But he's right, and Stan Laurel had it, Oliver Hardy had it, Michael Palin's got it. I don't know where it comes from. It's a gift from the gods.
Barry Cryer's son awarded the comedy award at the Slapstick Festival just yesterday here in Bristol to Armando Iannucci.
All right, yeah. Oh, he's a lovely guy, Bob. Yeah.
So I'm hoping to get Bob into a sort of good books about the Barry Cryer book as well at some point as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I think that's three influences. So
yeah, the fourth one's a bit of an odd one, but it's bicycling.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Which I'm completely obsessed with. I've done it all my life, and I've lived in London most of my life. I did used to own a car, and I'm all for driving. I'm not. Some cyclists are anti-driving. I'm very pro-driving, but my dream would be to have a car in London, and no one else had one.
Yeah.
Sadly, I can't arrange that, and so I sold my car because I spent my whole time stuck in traffic. But as I said, I've bicycled all my life, and it seems to me a thing of great, great beauty. So simple and so perfectly suited, well, particularly to my life. I live 2.5 miles from my office, so I have these terrific bike rides in the morning going down the hill from Islington into the centre of London. Slightly more exhausting coming back in the evening, but you feel better, and you always get there in the same time. The hell of having a car, much as I love cars, is this journey to work. During lockdown, I borrowed somebody's car, and it took me 6 or 7 minutes to get to the office. It can take an hour, whereas on my bike, it is almost always exactly 17 minutes. I can go round cars. I'm afraid I do occasionally go through red lights, only if there's no one there. But and you always feel better, even if you're bicycling through the rain. On the very rare occasions I have a hangover, it is like magic. After 15 minutes, the mood lifts. And quite often I find myself, this sounds very Pollyanna-ish, but actually singing. I'm afraid sometimes I listen on headphones on my bike and I sing along to something, and it kicks in after 15 minutes. I think it has been shown that endorphins are created after a certain amount of exercise. Anyway, I really would. It wouldn't be much good on a desert island having a bike unless the island was pretty big. But that would be my desert island thing, if we had a big island with enough road to bike on. But it's a sort of crucial part of my life. And a day without bicycling, I feel very, very ropey and more self-pitying than usual.
Harry, we could be twins, because I often say my bike is my freedom. I absolutely adore bicycling as well.
It's pure freedom, isn't it? You can get anywhere so quickly. I mean, obviously difficult if you live in the country and have to go huge distances. But one of my boring things in London, anywhere that's 7 miles away, it's quicker on a bike. After that, it could be quicker by car.
And one of my greatest joys ever was to be in San Francisco and then hire a bike and then go across the Golden Gate Bridge on a bike. It was just.
I've been to San Francisco, but I've never done that. That's wonderful.
And how are you on e-bikes, or is yours a sort of?
No. I've got one of those as well, which I don't know if you're a Peep Show fan or your viewers are, but there's a brilliant bit where Jez, the sort of trendy wild one, says to the nerdy Mark Corrigan, who's trying to cheer up, he says, "I've made you breakfast just like you like it. Brown toast to begin, then white toast as the treat. Electric bike as a treat." So it's I'm normally very self-denying, but if I've got to go a long distance or it's raining.
I'm in Bristol. I got this mantra, which is no hill in Bristol defeats me. But so I haven't succumbed to an e-bike, but I like hiring them when I'm away, actually.
Yeah, and it's a treat, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And now we're on to this. I'm fascinated by this. This is your squirrels now. What are your two monsters of distraction? What two things never fail to distract you, irrespective of anything else that might be going on for you in your life, Harry?
Well, I suppose this is obviously very boring. Is the internet is a terrible killer for me, and as it is for everyone. And then I suppose I do, like a lot of middle-aged men with a midlife crisis, I do swimming in Hampstead ponds. And whenever I've got two friends, I do it regularly. And whenever they say one of them is, or both of them are doing it, I'll drop everything to do it. Because actually it's not unlike bicycling, not least because I bicycle there. But however bad you're feeling, however cold it is, and I know people are very bored by people talking about it, but it does have a magical effect. So I would never turn that down. And the other thing, I don't know if this counts for your criteria, Chris, but is a foreign press trip, ideally to Italy or New York, where I worked for a while. And my terrible admission is I prefer press trips to holidays, because holiday, there's always the expectation of great enjoyment, isn't there?
Yes.
A place of great beauty. And if you happen to be in a place of great beauty and lovely weather, and you're not feeling very well in yourself, then you feel even more miserable. Whereas on a press trip, even when it's going badly, you're not supposed to be enjoying yourself, and you're also, in a very small way, often working. I mean, quite often you write the actual article when you get back. But I've had some of the most enjoyable, interesting times of my life on press trips. A couple of years ago, I went to Jamaica, and you get these incredible things laid on. And we went to Goldeneye, where Ian Fleming lived, and I was allowed to spend a night in Goldeneye, Ian Fleming's house, which is now a very smart hotel. And it was so wonderful. There was his desk,
Oh, yes.
all the drinks you could want, and his garage has been turned into a cinema, so you could watch all the Bond films. There was an outdoor bath. There was a little beach, which was his own beach, where you could go snorkeling. But I only had a day and a night to do it, so I had to stuff these things into a day and a night. But
Yeah.
Those are great, great pleasures.
It's the notion of purposeful travel rather than
Exactly. Yeah.
go and enjoy yourself. Yes.
Exactly. And also, even if something terrible happens, well, that's your first paragraph.
Yes. Yes. And you're the second guest that I've had on the show who said that they've been in that room with that desk. And I had a wonderfully enigmatic American chap called Stan Slap. He
Right.
had me at the name Stan Slap, I think, and he wrote his book I Buried My Heart in Conference Room B.
Very good. That sounds great.
That was on that desk as well. And now it's one is the quirky or unusual fact about you, Harry Mount, editor of the Oldie magazine, that we couldn't possibly know about you until you tell us.
I would say that my cousin is the great Tony Adams, former captain of Arsenal.
Oh.
And he married my dear cousin, Poppy Teacher. But she's quite a distant cousin, but I love her, but she's a third cousin. But I'm a huge Arsenal fan and grew up near Arsenal, and I still live near there. And so when she married him about, 15, 20 years ago, it was wonderful. And they say never meet your heroes, but absolutely wonderful in the flesh and very modest. And at several occasions, I've trapped him in a corner and bored him to death with questions, and he gives a perfectly good impression of not being too annoyed.
Whoa. He's also majestically tall. I've stood behind him recently. And yes, if you can furnish me with an introduction to him too, a little bit of wee would come out. That'd be very, very exciting. Thank you very much. He does such wonderful work because of his own path and journey for...
Yeah, no, he's incredibly admirable, and he's completely open about that. He's very early on. I think people are generally, thanks to him, very, very open about these things, but he was very early on in that whole thing. In fact, he's got a book coming out this summer, I think, about it being 30 years since Euro 96, when he went on a huge bender after we lost, and then gave up drink afterwards, and then hasn't drunk for 30 years. No, it's a wonderful story.
So do you get to see him a couple of times a year at least then?
Well, occasionally. In fact, I saw him just a couple of weeks ago. Here's talking, forgive the showing off, but talking about the joy of working at the Oldie. Through the Oldie, I became, I wouldn't presume to say quite good friends, but friends with the late Gilly Cooper. And she had the greatest memorial service of all time about a fortnight ago in Southwark Cathedral. She was extremely popular. There were her friends and family. There was the Queen. There was Tony Adams. There were her dogs, and everyone adored her. And then, in a way I've never seen before, at the end of it, she laid on, I think, could it be 200 magnums of champagne, and the Dean of Southwark, who had officiated her daughter's wedding, was a friend. And I think church doesn't look down on drinking, but I've never seen so many people knocking back champagne in a cathedral, singing the praises of someone so lovely. Anyway, that's the last time.
And 100 times as it sort of pops up to celebrate.
With God, when a glass was smashed. But anyway, it's a great occasion.
Harry Mount, we have shaken your tree. Hurrah. Now we stay in the clearing, move away from the tree. Now we talk about alchemy and gold. When you're at purpose and in flow, and you've been giving me alchemy and gold by the bucket load anyway, but what are you absolutely happiest doing in what you're here to reveal to the world? It's your purpose imperative, if you like.
I would say meeting someone interesting or doing something interesting and writing it up and it coming out right. I mean, the wonderful thing about journalism, and particularly about editing, is you can never tire of it, because you're never going to write the perfect piece yourself. And even if you commission someone brilliant like Barry Humphries, that then becomes a brilliant piece. But it's impossible, brilliant as all the writers are for the Oldie, to have an issue which is completely crammed with perfect pieces. So you're always looking for the ultimate. And so you're looking for the ultimate magazine you've edited, or pieces you've written. So perhaps the piece I most enjoyed writing was interviewing the late Hugh Hefner in his famous house in California, again about 20 years ago. Now, I'm not backing his disgusting way of life, but he was highly intelligent, very amusing, and very ironic. And when I asked him, you could ask him anything. There he was in his dressing gown, in his wonderful, really nice mock Elizabethan house in Beverly Hills. I said, where do you think this extraordinary obsession with sex came from? And he said, well, it's all your fault. And I said, what? And he said, my ancestors were Puritans who came over on the Mayflower, and I'm reacting against them. Anyway, I'm sure it's not true, but it's a brilliant answer. And even when he was saying things which, I'm sorry, don't sound very appetizing, but he had a way with words. I was also there interviewing his 3 girlfriends at the time, and I'd done my research, and he'd recently had 7 girlfriends. And I said, so what's happened to the others? And he said, well, they were all arguing, so I had to cull the herd. Now, I know that could be taken as disgusting, but he knew what he was saying, and it was ironic, and it was funny. And he was giving me these quotes. And so to spend a day going to the Hugh Hefner mansion, writing it up, I'm not saying the piece was particularly good, but the quotes he gave me were so good. And that's a sort of, what an interesting way to spend a day.
So that was a lovely illustration of a halcyon day of journalism for you in the Playboy mansion of Hefner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to award you with a cake finally, or sort of penultimately. And do you like cake, Harry Mount?
I do. Yeah, I've just been to my niece's birthday party. Had delicious strawberry and cream cake. Yeah.
I was going to ask you flavour of choice, so a strawberry and cream cake shall be yours.
Yeah.
And now you get to put a cherry on the cake with, and this is the final suffused with storytelling metaphor, with stuff like, what's a favourite inspirational quote, first of all, that's always given you succour and pulled you towards your future?
Okay, well, this is, as I said, I studied Latin and Greek at school, and I was a little nerdy boy, but I was doing this very dutifully, so I was very rarely moved by it, except there's one famous line in the Aeneid, which is Virgil's story of Aeneas, who fights for the Trojans in the Trojan War and loses to the Greeks. And we all know about Odysseus going back to Ithaca in the Odyssey, which is going to be in a Christopher Nolan film in the summer. But Aeneas was coming back or leaving Troy, and he had this God-sent mission to found Rome. He's the mythical founder of Rome, and he had a voyage like Odysseus, trying to get to Rome. I mean, at least Odysseus knew where Ithaca was. Ithaca hadn't yet, Rome hadn't yet been founded. He had to found it. And along the way, had terrible times, just like Odysseus. And there's a moment where he's shipwrecked. He's lost practically all his crew. And he thinks, I'm never going to found this mythical, extraordinary story. oh God, what's the point? He's absolutely miserable. And his friend Achates, faithful Achates, says, forgive me for quoting Latin, Chris, but he says, olim haec meminisse etiam juvabit, which means one day it will help to remember even these things. Now that's a sort of very literal way of translating, but it basically means even the worst things in life you'll eventually look back at and maybe laugh at, but they will have been helpful to you. And even then, as I don't know, 14 or 15-year-old, when I read that, I thought, God, that's amazing. Even then, despite being a bit of a miserable teenager, there were things I could look back on from my childhood, which were horrible at the time, which could be quite funny. You'll know the I don't know whose line it is, but the comedy is tragedy plus time. But
yes.
it doesn't apply to everything. You know, we all have terrible bereavements and illnesses in our family, which go on being miserable and be miserable forever. But most things which aren't on that level are eventually useful or even amusing to look back at. And I remember being struck by that when I was a teenager, and I feel it even more strongly now.
And just to deliberately reincorporate again, just give us the Latin quote again.
I hope I've got this right. Olim haec meminisse etiam juvabit.
And I also know that you've written Harry Mount's Odyssey as well, and you must be looking forward to the Matt Damon film of Odysseus.
Well, that's right. Yeah. So I, about 14 years ago, tried to recreate Odysseus's journey. It was, in fact, the idea of a terrific ex-girlfriend of mine who thought it was a really good idea as a way of gently introducing the history of ancient Greece and the philosophy and the tragedy and the comedy, all the rest of it, to those like her who were interested in it but hadn't been taught it. And so we started off doing it. We split up soon after we began. So there's quite a lot of lovelorn self-pity in the book as well. But it meant Odysseus's journey, it's not clear whether it ever happened, but I'm pretty sure the Trojan War did happen. And certainly there's an ancient site, an amazing palace on Ithaca of the right date, which could be Odysseus's palace. But either way, it looks almost certain that there was a fight between the East and the West. And if there was that sort of fight, the Greeks from the West, having won, would have to get back home. So I'm sure there was some sort of journey. So I recreated it, and lots of people have done it before, and lots of people have tried to claim bits of the Odyssey as their own. So there's a bit in the Odyssey where Odysseus goes to the far-flung land of the Cimmerians, shrouded in eternal mist, and a Hebridean classical scholar on reading that said, "Oh, he must have been to the Hebrides." But I think that's not necessarily true. But anyway, I went to the places that are most thought to have inspired the Odyssey.
Lovely. With the gift of hindsight, what notes, help or advice might you proffer to a younger version of Harry Mount? You can decide how old you are when you holographically reappear, put your arms around your own shoulders and whisper the following words in your own ear.
I would say to me, aged 6, don't worry so much about exams and schoolwork. I would then say to me, aged about 14, do English and history. These are very low-level aspirations, A levels. And I would then say to the 21-year-old Harry Mount, leaving university, become a journalist straight away. Don't become a lawyer or a banker.
Thus saving you a bit of time.
Yeah.
Love that. Very good. What's the best piece of advice somebody else has ever given you?
One of the great joys, I worked at the Daily Telegraph with, many of your viewers would have heard of the great Bill Deeds, who had started off working at the Telegraph when he was 17 in 1930. He'd won the MC in the war. He'd been a cabinet minister. He'd been the editor of the Daily Telegraph. He's most famous as Dear Bill in the fictional letters from Dennis Thatcher in Private Eye. And when he got the sack as the Telegraph editor in 1986, lots of people, he was 73 then, lots of grand people would say, well, I refused to work for my successor. Well, Bill was a very modest guy, and he went on working right till he died, aged 92, I think it was, for almost another 20 years. And he was wonderful to work with. He'd often come in on a Sunday when he wouldn't have to do the sort of Sunday leader writing rota. And one of his favorite quotes was from Arthur Balfour, and he had said a lot in his pieces, but also to me, which is what's it? Nothing matters very much, and very few things matter at all. And it's true. It's a bit like that Latin quote: is that things you get in a great panic about, in the grand scheme of things, they'll pass into the past. And actually, most things, not always the case, but will work out fine in the end.
It resonates with the Hamlet quote: "Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so."
Exactly. That's another terrific one. And of course, you know, at the heart of these things, when something's terrible is going on, that doesn't, none of those wonderful quotes help that much, but in time they almost always come true.
And reincorporating your Latin quote, of course, that is about the fact that these things shape us and hew us out of the rock of experience, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you, even without thinking consciously about those quotes, but if it's happened to you enough and things have got better, something in your subconscious knows that.
We're ramping up sort of penultimately to talk about Shakespeare, but just before we do that, this is something called Pass the Golden Baton, Please, which is the invitation, now that you've experienced this from within, who in your network, Harry Mount, editor of the Oldie magazine, might you most like to pass the golden baton along to be given a damn good listening to in this way?
To do the same interview you've kindly done.
Yeah.
Who would be good? I would say
Tony Adams. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
I try not to think of him. I would say Stephen Frears. I think that because I've just been watching A Very English Scandal, the brilliant series he did on Jeremy Thorpe, the great Jeremy Thorpe scandal. And I know him a tiny bit, and I think he's consistently one of the greatest filmmakers alive, and he's extremely modest. When you praise him for his wonderful films and TV series, he says, well, nothing to do with me. You just get good actors and good scripts, but it really is to do with him. And but Chris, you might be better at teasing out of him how you become such a consistently great director. No duds.
What an extremely generous golden baton pass. Thank you very much indeed for that. And now, inspired by Shakespeare, the Seven Ages of Man speech, all the world's a stage and all the bearded women merely players, I'm now going to invite you, finally, to talk about legacy, Harry, and how, when all is said and done, you would most like to be remembered.
Well, I would love to be remembered as a great novelist, which seems unlikely because I've actually not published any novels. I've written 2 novels, which were never even published, which I wrote in my 20s and my 30s, and they were really no good. And that's not false deprecation. They were really no good. But I think they're the hardest thing to do and the greatest thing to do. So when I talked about my heroes like Evelyn Waugh, Kingsley Amis, Nancy Mitford, I read and reread them, hoping that I could somehow work out how they did it. But I think a bit like Barry Humphries, they work on a higher level. And I've written quite a few non-fiction books which I've enjoyed doing, and I love reading non-fiction as well. But that would be the aspiration. But it you have to A, write one, and B, have one published for that to come true.
May I ask if you have a favourite piece of music? Because my editor is a genius at texturing in if I ask that question.
I am an absolutely huge Elvis fan, and rather perversely, I particularly like late Elvis. I think it's extremely moving that although his range declined, his voice remained absolutely heartbreaking. And I love the late ballads. And there's an obscure one sung by lots of other singers, but not many people know him singing. And it's called And I Love You So. It's completely heartbreaking.
Beautiful. When you listen to this back, there'll be a little gift for you at this moment. And now, thank you for that, we have a very exciting moment, which is called Show Us Your QR Code, Please. For those who have been listening and watching, or you can do both, I've just brought up Harry's QR code for the Oldie magazine website. There you go. So could you, for those that are not able to scan the QR code and go straight there, would you please give us the URL, Harry, Mount, for the Oldie magazine?
It's very easy, theoldie.co.uk, and there are some wonderful deals going for young and old alike.
And have I got that wrong in what's on the domain there? It says it's the Oldie magazine.
Yes, you have, yeah.
But
I'm sure the QR code works.
Yes, we'll find out. So just to correct me, just say it again, because I think I could hashtag awkward get rid of the QR code. Thank you.
It's all one word, theoldie.co.uk.
Wonderful. Just a quick announcement for me, then there is a final question for you coming up in a moment. If you'd like a conversation having heard this show to being in the show as well, the website for the show is thegoodlisteningtoshow.com. Very excitingly, the show syndicates to UK Health Radio, and literally as I go to publish this time, as of a week ago, it also syndicates to Brushwood Media in the States as well. So if you'd like a conversation about guesting, that's thegoodlisteningtoshow.com. And then also, Harry and I have been doing a hybrid version of the show, which is called Legacy Life Reflections, which is to record your life story or the story of someone that you love for posterity, lest we forget before it's too late, with no morbid intention. But my own father, Colin Grimes, who died just over a year ago. And when I first rang you, Harry, I was in Madeira dealing with my father's ashes.
I'm so sorry. My condolences.
But I recorded my father, actually, who's become a really wonderful, beautiful, happy mascot for the show, in the halcyon days of his 80s before he slipped into a crater of declining health, which I know through hindsight. As I say, no morbid intention, but we can use this same unique and hopefully you'll agree, Harry, thoroughly enjoyable storytelling structure in order to tell your life story or the story of someone that you love for posterity. Harry Mount, editor of the Oldie magazine, here comes your final question. As this has been your moment in the sunshine in the Good Listening To show, Stories of Distinction and Genius, is there anything else you'd like to say?
The only thing I've missed out in your really good, brilliant interview structure is the most important thing I think I did in my life, which was to work as a correspondent in New York for the Daily Telegraph. And it wasn't what I was naturally suited to, because it's quite nerve-wracking. You'd be sitting chatting to a friend like you in the evening, and this is the nature of the job, it's quite right, but you'd suddenly get a phone call saying 13 Amish people have been shot dead in Pennsylvania. And as well as the tragedy of that, you suddenly have to get down there and get there before the guy from the Times gets there. And it was very, very nerve-wracking, but it was, perhaps because it was outside my comfort zone, it was the most interesting thing I've ever done.
And this is a lovely testament to your halcyon days with your hack chops, if you like, in full throttle. Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, for listening. I've been Chris Grimes, but most importantly, this has been Harry Mount, editor of the Oldie magazine. Anything else you'd like to say, Harry?
No, just thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and you brought up memories I've forgotten I had.
Wonderful. And as you know, there's the possibility of a wonderful reciprocal arrangement where I'd absolutely love to be a sort of storyteller in residence for you and your wonderful Oldie magazine demographic.
Fantastic. I must have a word with the powers that be on that one.
Lovely. And I'll share everything with you as soon as it goes live. And thank you very much indeed for listening. I've been Chris Grimes. That's Harry Mount. Good night.